Hello everyone, welcome back to Sunbear Studios. My name's Matt, and this is my review for the My Chemcial Romance Long Live the Black Parade show. I went down to Wembley to go and see My Chem headline and play the Black Parade album cover to cover. It was absolutely phenomenal. I think the best way that I can describe it straight off the bat is art in its absolute purest form. From character work to story and narrative to story structure to musical performance to staging to costume, it was just such a complete work of art that it was absolutely jaw-dropping and is unlike anything else that I can ever recall seeing. Before we get into the My Chemcial Romance Long Live the Black Parade review, I think I'm actually going to do two videos on this. So this video specifically will be just for the review of the show. But I'm going to do a second video which dives down more into the lore of the Black Parade album, kind of explain what my interpretations of the narrative and the story are, and kind of connect the dots between the ending of that album and how we got to drag into this communist dictatorship regime, which the Long Live the Black Parade show is now set in, because that is not the story of the original album. And I think it's really interesting how we've kind of gone from one story but replaying the album with a completely different story. That to me just takes so much genius creative thinking to be able to do both so well, like My Chem have done. We got there a little bit later in the day, so we missed the first band that was on, who I believe was a guy from LS Dunes, who's in that band with Frank Hero, the My Chem guitarist. So unfortunately we missed him. We did get there in time for the main support, which was a band called Sunny Day Real Estate. Now, that's a band that I don't know anything about particularly. The only Sunny Day Real Estate fact that I have is that Nate, who's the bassist in Foo Fighters, used to be in Sunny Day Real Estate before he joined Foos. But I couldn't tell you what their music is or sounds like or anything like that. So this was all completely new to me, and it was fine. I don't think it had anything in particular that kind of caught my ear or that stood out for me as being a sort of wow moment that made me think I need to go away and listen to this band and get into them and discover them more. In a dream fantasy scenario, I'd have liked to have seen The Used. Can understand why The Used and My Chemcial Romance are probably kept separate, but there we go. So after Sunny Day Real Estate then, on the screens to the sides of the main stage, they had these rules that would appear. And then there was some that kind of came up in this language, which I believe is sort of a made-up language that's specific for drag, which is sort of the setting that this show kind of takes place in. I'll get into more on that in a minute. And they were really bizarre. Like, I think one of them was, if you start a maiden voyage, you have to complete the maiden voyage. It was all just really quite weird stuff, but it immediately sets the tone of this sort of communist dictatorship regime. That is where this show's story is happening. So after all those rules, there was then a song then started playing, which was Vera Lynn Will Meet Again. I'm going to touch on more in this in my lore video, because I think that's quite an interesting song to pick. And then they kind of came out and did the national anthem of drag, and there was a big sort of ceremonial procession where the grand dictator guy kind of comes out and takes his seat. I think he was by the sound desk. We were quite far back at Wembley. We were in sort of the rear standing section, so I couldn't see exactly where he was, but I think he was down by the one of the sound desks kind of off to the side, sort of overlooking the show, really. He comes out, takes his seat on a big throne. There's then sort of two opera singers. There's then some military people who kind of march out and lay kind of a yield of sort of corn or hay or something like that. Very sort of communist agricultural, farm the land sort of vibes. And then My Chemcial Romance came on stage. And they go straight into the end, which is the first song off the album. My God, this crowd was loud. This was one of the loudest crowds I've ever experienced. I've been in crowds for Green Day, I've been in crowds for Foos, I've been in crowds for Metallica, for Sabbath. You know, people have their songs that they connect to and then they know all the words to and they scream it out loud. This was something else. This was 80,000 people singing at the absolute top of their lungs from the first word of that album to the last word of that album. There were times where I couldn't hear Gerard. I struggled to hear the band because the volume inside that stadium was just so loud from 80,000 people singing their hearts out. As somebody who's not religious, I think that's the closest I'm ever going to get to a sort of religious experience. You know, people go to church to feel part of something, to feel connected to community. That's why music is such a big thing in church. People want to feel connected to something. That's kind of what religion offers people. It offers a community. This was that. This was community. This was literally people singing from the same hymn sheet. You know, it was that phrase personified. Religious, spiritual. It was. There were parts where I stopped watching the band and just turned around and just looked at Wembley because we were on the pitch and, you know, those three tiers of the stadium kind of coming round you. I was just looking around saying, this is incredible. This is absolutely incredible. And I can imagine that wasn't just that night. I can imagine that was all 3 nights at Wembley, that was the night at Glasgow, that was the night in Liverpool, that was all nights on the US tour last year. I think it just speaks volumes to how good that album is, but also how well that album's aged. You know, you listen to some albums, you're like, oh, you just wouldn't do that anymore. And when bands, you know, bring back old songs, they kind of redo them or change them a little bit. This was note for note, word for word, the same album. So kudos to My Chem, and I think it just goes to show that the Black Parade is a all-time great album. So one of the things that I clocked straight away was how great Gerard looked, not just in terms of health, but in terms of being comfortable on stage. Like when we saw them, I think it was 4 years ago at Milton Keynes on the Swarm tour, just after they got back together. He was obviously having to be himself on stage. He was having to be Gerard Way. And because of that, I think he actually looked very nervous and a bit rattled in hindsight on that show. Here, because of the theatrics, because of the performance, because of the story, he's able to play a character. He's able to play the leader of the Black Parade. And he just seemed to be thriving in it. He seemed to just be enjoying it so much, from, you know, the costumes, and I know he's doing sort of intricate little details each night. So I think one of the earlier nights in Wembley, he came out with like a big scar down the side of his face. On Saturday, he came out with this sort of Phantom of the Opera-esque, sort of Slipknot-esque half and half mask that was sort of semi-transparent. That performance aspect, you can tell that he's just really thriving in and really getting something out of. And because of that, he just oozed charisma and oozed confidence. And it was really great to see that, because I think this was Gerard Way at the absolute peak of his powers. I think this was him having 80,000 people in the absolute palm of his hand. I think this to me is the frontman Gerard Way should have always been. And I think it's taken him a long time to get there. And I know he's kind of gone through personal battles and stuff like that. But he just oozed confidence and oozed swag here. And yeah, it was the best he's ever been. So the band then launch into the Black Parade in full. The End, Dead, Sharpest Lives, and How I Disappear, back to back to back. It's all very, very, very quick, which is great, because if you've watched some of my other videos, especially like the download review, you'll know that one of the biggest gripes I have with live music at the moment is bands playing a song and then walking off stage whilst there's sort of like 3 minutes of a weird intermission. and then they come back out and play another song, and then they go off stage again. And what that means is that there's never a flow of energy. It's like you kind of get to a point where you're like energized, and then it's like somebody pulling the handbrake on, and all that energy stops. It's all drained away, and then when the band come on, they've got to start again. So there's never this sort of flow and continuation of momentum throughout the show. And I'm so happy to say that this did not do that. This was just bang, 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 bang. And because of that, the middle of the album and the end of the album had the exact same energy, if not more, than the start of the album, because it was continuously building and continuously being elevated. So kudos to My Chem on that as well, because that's something that just really irritates me, and I was so glad to see that they weren't doing that. So after Sharpest Lives comes the anthem.
When I was a young boy, my father took me into the city to see how much.
You only need to hear that one piano note, and that was it. And it was, the crowd was loud throughout the whole night, and as I said earlier, you couldn't hear Gerard for most of it. I don't think I heard him sing this song. Luckily, we got some video footage, I think, and if we've got some of that, I'll drop it in now. Certainly where we were stood, with all the people around us, my ears were just picking up the people. I wasn't picking up the band at all. Yeah, just absolutely incredible. After that, there needed to just be a moment where everybody just pauses for a second, catches their breath. So up until Mama, the show is very kind of communist regime. It feels like the band are performing for the dictator character. He's kind of there overseeing it. And on the screen at the back of Wembley Stadium, I think after each song, sort of an image of his face with wording kind of is appearing. So it is like he is sort of watching over the band and observing. There was a few really interesting sort of story beats and narrative beats throughout the show as well. So there was like a clerk character who kept on sort of walking on stage and handing notes to Gerard, and one of them contained a birthday card. It was not Gerard Way's birthday, but it was the 1 year anniversary of this being a touring production. I'll touch on that again more in the lore video, I think. But yeah, a couple of really interesting sort of character beats. I'd seen a few videos of this online before going to the show, but I did not expect there to be a mock execution halfway through this show. And I think this ties back into the story and the communist regime of, you know, the illusion of choice. Because on the way into the stadium, we were given these signs that say yay on one side and nay on another. And they bring these people up onto this sort of B stage that's in the middle of the front standing section, who've got black bags over their heads. And Gerard kind of asks the crowd, do they win? It was a weird prize. Do they win? Was it a set of matching bicycles? Which I wonder if that's a Queen reference to I Want to Ride My Bicycle. Maybe, don't know. Or do we give them the freedom of death? And of course, everybody wants to see the second option. So everyone votes nay. And they pull up these like cardboard cutouts of soldiers with guns. Gerard shouts, ready, aim, fire. And on fire, there's a huge explosion. And the people that are on stage with the black bags over their heads fall down, executed. I did not ever expect to go to a rock show at Wembley Stadium and see a mock execution. So that was a new one for me. But again, I think it really adds a story beat into the viciousness of this regime, which the story of this show is set in, and a really kind of interesting character beat of how you either comply or die, basically, in terms of the inner universe of that story. So we carry on through the album, and I think the next big song to talk about is Mama. This song was used as the bridging between the performance of the Black Parade to the dictator character. So throughout the early part of the show, there's kind of this backdrop behind them about a city that's sort of looks a bit derelict, but very sort of concrete, very sort of brutalistic. It ties a lot into that kind of communist theme. That then pulls back and reveals this screen for Mama, and we're now in this nuclear bunker. And there's, satellite images and radars and stuff all going on. I think at one point there was a man on fire who just ran across the stage whilst in flames during this song. And it's never alluded to. Nobody ever goes, what about that guy on fire? Everyone's just like, yeah, happens. As I said earlier, the theatrics of this show were absolutely mind-blowing. So Mama kind of then advances the story into nuclear warfare. And I think at this point, we all know there is impending doom coming. When we kind of get into Sleep, which is the next song of the album, and you kind of see footage of sort of like nuclear missiles launching and flying through the air, it adds a new layer of meaning to that song. It adds a new layer of meaning of just acceptance that this is your fate and that fate is sealed and sometimes there's nothing you can do, which aligns to the very, very dark tones of the Black Parade as an album. The creative genius that goes into plotting out this new story and making it work and making it connect with the songs and elevating the songs that were written and designed for a completely different narrative and completely different story it's pure art. It's art in its absolute purest form. If you go to a gallery, you can stand looking at a painting next to another person, and you can both appreciate the art on face value and what's physically in front of you. But you can take two very different interpretations of that painting and the meaning behind it and how we got to the image that you're seeing. This show had that. If you wanted to go and just enjoy the music, that's great. If you wanted to enjoy the drag story of the Long Live the Black Parade tour, that's great. If you want to go away like I'm going to do and think about, well, how does this connect into the original story of the Black Parade album? You can do. Art in its absolute purest form. So we then carry on through the album up until Famous Last Words. As the song title suggests, the end is here. The end is happening. And the band start, and the front kind of part of the stage sets on fire. Tiny little flames. But then they start growing, and they spread out down the wings. And then the sort of sides of the stage, like the setting that's on the side of the stage, catches on fire. And it spreads and grows until by the end of this song, the entire stage is on fire.
Are you ready? I am not afraid to keep on living. I am not afraid to walk this world out.
There's fireworks shooting off the top of Wembley Stadium. There's rockets going backwards and forwards over the top of the crowd. Like I say, I don't have the words to describe this. It was jaw-dropping. Absolutely jaw-dropping. That song is one of the best songs on the album anyway, in my opinion. But that memory of being stood in Wembley with all of that going on is something that's just going to live with me for a very, very long time. It was jaw-dropping, spectacle, art, mesmerising. I'm running out of words. I don't know how else to kind of describe just how good this was. So that then finishes, but that's not the end of the album, because the Black Parade has a hidden track, Blood. And during this song, the clerk or the guy that played the clerk, is now back as a sort of what I can only describe as a sort of French Renaissance clown, sort of white with big black buttons with a big white kind of hat on. And he's now joined by one of the opera singers who appeared a couple of various times throughout the show, who's dressed in the exact same way. And they pull out a knife and they kill Gerard. Like, slash him, blood squirts out everywhere. Like I say, the theatrics in this show, give me this again on Broadway. I will fly to New York and go and see it. That's how good this was. So Gerard's now bleeding, and he makes a crawl for the front of the stage. As he kind of gets to, ultimately, his final resting place, there is a white outline, like a murder scene, like a life on the murder scene. The tie-ins were phenomenal, and I got a little bit giddy realising this one. So that's the end of Gerard. That's the end of the Black Parade as such. But that's not the end of the two clowns, because they then open their jackets up, reveal that they are wearing suicide bomber vests, and blow themselves up on the stage. And that's the end of the Black Parade. That's the end of this part of the show. And then it was a good job that there was a long intermission, because I think I just stood there for about 15 minutes just absorbing what I'd just witnessed and trying to take it in and trying to process it. So I'm going to split the gig in two here, and I think it's important to do this. The Black Parade part of this show, cover to cover, one of the best things I've ever seen. One of the best live experiences of any kind I've ever seen. Not just a concert, not just a performance. One of the best pieces of art I have ever witnessed. Phenomenal and flawless. The second part of this show, the band come out, and they've changed back into sort of their normal clothes at this point. They reintroduce themselves as My Chemical Romance. The show is very much split in two. They then go to where the B stage was, as I said, in that front crowd, and they played a really interesting set list. Let me read this to you. So this was the Saturday at Wembley, and the set list was Boy Division, Party Poison, I'm Not Okay, Desert Song, Na Na Na, Vampires Will Never Hurt You, Vampire Money, Sing, Helena, Kids from Yesterday. That is a weird set list, because Helena has the lyrics So Long and Good Night in. To me, that's the perfect end song. A bit like Don Broco with T-Shirt Song. You know, you finish on that song. That's just where it goes in the set. That's where it fits. So to then do Kids from Yesterday after that was an interesting choice to me. Boy Division off Conventional Weapons, I think I've heard once or twice before. Great song, by the way. Really, really good song. But yeah, Boy Division, Party Poison, Kids from Yesterday, maybe Vampire Money as well. I'm surprised that those four got played. But having gone back and looked at other set lists, what they were doing was that they were changing this set list every night. So I think everybody got Na Na Na, I'm Not Okay, Helena. But then the rest of those songs, I think, varied quite a lot. And I know we got quite a lot of tracks from Danger Days because they've just re-released Danger Days as an album. I think that might be on an anniversary now as well. So I get that they're trying to promote that. I think it's cool that they feel confident enough to be able to do this. And kudos to, people like the drummer and the keyboardist, who I'm not sure are actual members of the band. I think they're sort of session musicians, but they obviously have to know the entire discography of My Chemical Romance, because anything could be on these set lists for the second half of it. That's a lot of time, effort, dedication, talent, musicianship that probably won't get appreciated by a lot of people. But to be able to play 10 different songs every single night for, a year's worth of touring, 18 months worth of touring, is a phenomenal achievement, really. The sound for me in this portion of the show wasn't great. We were probably 3/4 of the way back in terms of like from the main stage to on the Wembley Stadium pitch. Like directly central, the two kind of speaker towers were sort of pushing out to the side, so I'm not sure we were catching that sound. I think we were catching more of the sound from the front. But it sounded to me like there was a lot of reverb added to Gerrard's vocals for this portion, which Wembley is a stadium that has been designed to keep the sound in. It's been designed so that when there's football matches there, the sound elevates. So for me, I was catching the reverb on Gerrard's voice, but then it was reverbing off the stadium itself. So there was so much reverb going on that it was actually quite difficult to hear him, and particularly when he was talking kind of in between the songs. And I didn't think that the punch of the drums at this point was great. I thought everything sort of blended into that sort of murkiness middle layer. If you were down the front and your favourite band in the world is My Chemcial Romance, I can fully appreciate that this was absolutely unbelievable. Don't get me wrong, it was still good. It was still good. For me personally, I'm really glad that we got to hear Vampires Will Never Hurt You. It's one of my favourite My Chem songs. I am a bit gutted that we didn't get Give 'Em Hell Kid, which is one of my favourites, along with Ghost of You, which I know they have been playing on some of the other nights of the shows. I guess there is there's a nice contradiction in there between the main show and this, with the main show being themed around communism and control. It was very structured. You know, the album starts at the end and runs through to Famous Last Words and Blood, and they played every single song in order. Whereas this was random. Anything could happen. It was spontaneous. I think it was almost meant to be the sort of yang of freedom and expressionism to the main show's yin, if that makes sense. But overall then, yeah, certainly the first part of the show, the Black Parade part of the show, one of the best gigs I've ever been to. And I've been to a lot of gigs and a lot of very, very good gigs. This will stay with me for a long time. This will be one that I talk about for a long, long time. I missed My Chem touring the Black Parade originally when they first released the album. So I'm really, really glad that I got to see this. And just yesterday I was watching on YouTube My Chem's Reading Festival set from that era as well. And you look at this performance compared to that, it's night and day. It's night and day. They are far better musicians. They are far better showmen. And Gerrard just finally feels like he is the ultimate Gerrard way that has always been inside of him, but, you know, possibly, you know, anxiety and stuff like that has sort of been holding him back. He feels like he's finally free to be the performative Gerrard way that means that he is at the absolute peak of his powers, and kudos to him, because being in the stadium to see that was, like I said, religious at times. I think that's the best way to describe it. So that's my review of the Long Live the Black Parade show. As I say, I do want to do a second video where I dive more into the lore of the original album and kind of help connect the dots, for me anyway, between how we got from the Black Parade as an album to this show and what that all means. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, please subscribe and turn the notifications on as well. That way you'll get a notification when that video goes live and you'll be one of the first people to see it. If this is something that you enjoyed, please like the video. That helps me kind of grow the channel. And yeah, if you went to this show, I'd be super interested to know what your experiences were, especially if you went to one of the other Wembley dates or went to either the Liverpool or Glasgow date. I'd be super interested to know what your experience of the show was. So leave me a comment down below. Thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.